hello, and welcome back to our new episode of Love It or Shove It. And we are so grateful to see you all here. It's me, Irina Portnova, manifestation coach, coming together with my co host, Bruno Gill. And today we have in the studio Angus Scott. Angus, it's awesome to see you with us. Thanks so much for coming. Can you just tell a couple of words about yourself?
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here with you guys. I'm so excited to share the space and get to know you guys. A little bit about myself. Uh, I guess the thing that most people love hearing about is the fact that I have two divorces in my past, four kids, and basically found myself single, heartbroken at around 40, and knowing that I was at least part of the cause for those divorces. And I decided that I was committed to figuring out what went wrong inside of me and inside of the relationships. And as I did, I was amazed at how easy it is to actually change and grow, especially when you do the work at the subconscious or unconscious level. And from there, I just became passionate about that healing and growing and changing, and want to bring that to the world, because I believe that when you have that healthiness inside, you'll attract an amazing partner. And when you have that kind of love, it affects every other area of life. Every other of life gets better and more enjoyable and easier when you have that kind of love.
Wow, I just love what you shared. I actually recently got divorced.
Mm,
So for me it's very fresh.
yeah.
Yes, I just love everything what you shared, and I love that topic that we have for today's episode, and it's the power of having plus one in our life.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And
yes, can we talk a little bit about that?
well, first of all, I want to acknowledge where you're at, and that you're in that stage. I don't know how much grief you're still experiencing, but I've been in something similar, and so I know it's not an easy thing. And so I acknowledge you just for continuing to move through it and continuing to grow and push in. So good
Thanks
luck
so
with that.
much.
Yeah,
Appreciate.
yeah. And what was your question?
The question was, remember we chose the title, The Power of Having Plus One in Our Life. Let's just dive in and talk about how important it is to have that powerful connection on all the levels, and how is it helping us to grow and evolve in our life.
So for me, one of the things that I found, and I think a lot of men are like this, not all, because some men just, they can do it for themselves. If they set their mind to something, they'll just go and get it. But that's, for a lot of men, they need something bigger, something outside of themselves to press in and work for. And so either way, it doesn't really matter. But as humans, we are designed to live with other people. We're not really as effective. We don't really have as good a quality of life if we're solo. So if we need tribe, if we need connection, if we need love, like building it intentionally and creating it is incredibly important for the level of satisfaction and happiness that you find in your life, and especially as you go through life. It's even shown that people that are outside of a loving, connected partnership live somewhere between 7 and 15 years less long than somebody who is in a committed, happy relationship. So it's not just about the joy and the connection. It does actually bleed over into other areas of life. And for me, one of the things that was incredibly obvious for me, as a guy who is an entrepreneur, has several companies, has been in sales most of my life, when my relationships weren't good, my productivity in work also really struggled, because I would go to work, but I'd be, in the back of my mind, at least, if not in the forefront of my mind, was, I'm going to have to go home and fix this problem, try to solve this. And so I'm not focused, I'm not present at work, I'm thinking about something else. And it really started to drag down my performance in those other areas. Not everybody's like that, but I think a lot of people, when they have something that's distracting them, it keeps them from being their very best.
Oh my God, I totally resonate with you. And I think that,
That's
like peace, inner peace, and, like emotional stability, like it's gold, right?
yeah,
Because, like you mentioned, Angus, it's so important, because if we are not ourselves, when something is happening in our relationship, obviously it's going to impact every area of our life.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. Bruno, did you have anything to add to this?
Yes. Absolutely. I agree 100% with what Angus said. Absolutely agree with everything. It's
Sweet.
like I honestly like I think that people in my case, it's like when sometimes when we have a plus one, like when we have somebody with us, that person is able to notice certain things that we do that we're not really aware of.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important. Like for example, like I'm in a relationship with Irina, and she has noticed things in me that in the beginning I was like, no, I don't do this, no, I don't do this. And I've always been like a little bit stubborn myself. But then there were times where like I was like, wait a second, like I'm doing that. Like it's like it
Mhm.
just falls back on your mind, right? And I've always been like a person who self-reflects quite a lot.
Right.
Um, but once I started like also self-reflecting about that, it kind of just hit me. I was like, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, you do that. I mean, you actually do it. So, and sometimes like when we're so caught up in the moment, we don't even understand it, right? Like for example, you were talking about like productivity. A lot of people, they don't actually have the power to, like they don't actually have the power to um, separate their problems at home from their business or from their job, and then they inevitably don't have the power to withstand the pull
Yeah.
of I'm angry. I can't hold this anger. I need to burst at somebody, and usually people don't burst out at like the right people, right? And they burst out in the wrong places as well, right?
Right.
And so it's like like a healthy life. Is a healthy. You have a healthy mind, right? Like, and you live a healthy life. Like you you just end up going to your job happier when your relationship is happy, right? You get out of your job and then you're like, oh, finally I'm gonna go home to my wife, right? And I'm talking from the perspective of the men, like it as
Sure.
well, right? We go home to our wives, we're happy, right? Like we're gonna see our family, we're gonna see, I don't have kids yet. I don't even know if I'm gonna have them. But like from the perspective of a man, like it's like I'm going home to my wife. I'm also going home to my kids, right? Like, um, so it's like simple. But for example, I've noticed that like a lot of men, they don't want to go home if they're unhappy with their wife. They don't want to go home. They actually want to
Right.
stay in their job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the negatives of being in a relationship is that you can't even go to where you wanted to go by default
Right.
because you're experiencing the wrong side of what it is like to have a plus one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for example, I want to ask you a question. um how can like people deal with that? Like how can people like deal with that negative side of the plus one? Like I want to go home, but I'm unhappy with my wife, and my wife isn't happy with me, and I don't know how to start. Like what should I say? What shouldn't I say? I want to go home, I really do, but I rather go to a bar or go drink a beer or whatever with somebody that is not gonna make me like feel bad about myself or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic question. There's a couple different directions I can think of to go, but the first thing that I will say that made a huge difference for me is that before, like, I'm going to pause. After I got out of my second marriage, I was actually, I'll go ahead and say I was bitter because it was like we made vows, like we committed to each other, and those vows like didn't hold up. And I started self-reflecting, and it was like, okay, so but those vows that we said that we exchanged were kind of just generic. It was kind of like, we never talked about them again. We never really thought about them again. And so I said to myself, I'm going to write new vows to whoever my next partner is that I begin to live now. And so I actually went through and started writing. I have vows that I've written years before that said, it's regardless of who I'm in a relationship with, this is who I'm going to be. So I can tell them to my partner and say, this is the me that you're going to get. Even when you act in an ugly way, even when you are not giving me what I love, what I want, I still get to show up this way. Because the vow, I think in modern times, we've kind of made it to where it feels good, like, oh, you're amazing, so I'm going to do these things for you. No, the vow is when you're not amazing, when you're having your worst day, I'm still going to show up a certain way. And I think that that creates incredible stability for a relationship. And especially for us men, when we're writing that and we follow through on that, and that woman sees that we are consistent and we show up a certain way, even when it doesn't feel good, those things create safety in a relationship. And safety is one of the most important things for women. So if we can show that, if we can show up in that way, it can put her at some level of ease. And I think it also allows us to have some credibility as we try to lead that relationship where we want it to go. Because while it may be controversial, it seems like most women actually respect the men in their life more if they actually are good leaders. Now, they may want to lead the relationship, and if the men let them really lead the relationship, that'll feel good usually for a little bit, but oftentimes she ends up losing respect for the man. So he does need to be a good leader. That doesn't mean he gets to make all the decisions by himself. It doesn't mean that he's running everything, without consulting her, but the buck stops with him. And if he's leading that relationship from a place of he's showing up consistently, doing what he's supposed to do, and giving and loving and leading and bringing that level of teamwork, which I think is so often lost in relationships, because if you as a couple have a problem and you blame each other, that means you're starting to see each other as the problem, not the problem as the problem. And if you can remind each other that, hey, there's a problem here, I acknowledge it, let's work on solving it together, that creates a much healthier dynamic. And I think that the byproduct of that is, to your point, what makes you want to come home and what makes her want to celebrate you coming home. If I can, I want your response to that, but I'll share a quick example of the opposite of this. So when I come home, I have a little dog. Her name is Peaches. She's amazing. But every time I walked in the door, she'd run to the door, and dogs, they're just the happiest things in the world. Like when you get to home, it's like, it doesn't matter if you left mad, if you're coming home grumpy, they're just happy to see you. Well, every time I would come home, the dog would meet me at the door, super happy, her tail wagging, everything crazy. And I would bend down and talk real sweet in a high-pitched voice to her and scratch her ears and stuff like that. Well, then my woman, Mayan, she saw the attention that I would pay the dog. And then she started, and now it's a habit. When I get home, the dog runs around the corner down the hallway and greets me, and so does Mayan. Like, she comes around the corner and she kind of like shakes and wiggles for me. And it's so fun for me as a man to come home to people, and like, my dog is a people and my woman's a person. Like, they're both excited to see me. Well, do you think I want to go somewhere else? I'm not going to go to any bar. I'm not going to go hang out with any guys who are more excited to see me than those two are. Like, I'm now excited about coming home. And so, speaking to you women, you don't need to shake your butt or anything like that, but like, what is the energy that he comes home to? Like, are you creating an inviting, like, receptive, warm, welcoming place where he's excited to come home? And if not, like, why not? Like, why not make your home the place he wants to spend the most time?
I love it. I
That's
love what you shared. Yes, super important. But again, you know what comes to my mind, Angus? Awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, not too many people are working on themselves, and not too many people understand the dynamic. And that's where the friction happens.
Yeah,
And
I'll
that's
say,
what
go ahead.
that's why it's so important to like really have that self-awareness, right? And I love how you said about it, like uh problem shouldn't be like it's your problem or it's my problem. Like, just acknowledge the problem is just, like a separate thing, and let's find how to deal with that. Let's see something, right? Let's communicate, let's make it happen. And it takes a great level of, acceptance and encouragement, and also the awareness.
Yeah. So I would say, like, right after awareness should come intention. So, like, you're
Mm-hmm.
aware, but then, like, what's your intention with that? Because if you don't set an intention, which I think that's a huge part that's missing, like, in our culture right now, where I'm not blaming it on Disney, but like, for many people, they've grown up on Disney type of movies where it's like, oh, the two people met, there was a little struggle, and then happily ever after. Well, like, that's that last 15 seconds of the movie, happily ever after, is 60, 70, 80, 90 years Like, it's not just happily ever after. It's what is our intention? How are we going to choose to be happily ever after? And creating that intention initially, I think it comes down to before you even get into a relationship. Like, when you're single, what is your intention for your next relationship? How are you going to show up and what are you intending to create? And then from there, what's your follow up to make sure? So, like, Mayan and I have a weekly date night, and most people are like, oh, yeah, we do too. No, no, no. I'm not talking about you go to dinner. In fact, I usually joke and say most people's idea of date night is, okay, it's date night. What do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you feel like? I don't know. What do you? And we argue until we finally agree to go to some place, have a meal we won't remember in 2 days,
Oh my
and
God.
call it a date night. When we go on a date night, like, I pick a place to go. We usually go to dinner first. We bring a notebook. That notebook is what we call our gratitude journal. One of us writes first, and we'll take up like half of a page with as many things as we can think of to be grateful for the other person in the last week. And then the other one writes as many things as we can be grateful for the other person in the last week. And then we both write a number. We believe in having a 10 out of 10 relationship. And so we write a number, which is a number on a scale of 1 to 10. How good is this relationship right now? And so if it's a 10, we celebrate that. If it's not a 10, if it's a 9.4 or a 9.7 or an 8.9, we have a conversation like, okay, what do I need to do to get it back up to a 10 in your eyes? And then she'll tell me, like, you know what, you said you were going to vacuum and you didn't, or, you said something and it hurt my feelings, or, we said we were going to have a financial meeting last week and it feels like you're avoiding it. Like, whatever is in between us, we bring it to the table right then, and then make a commitment to, okay, by this time next week, we're going to be back to a 10 out of 10. And so we are intentional about the type of relationship that we're trying to create. And then we take action to make sure that that happens.
Wow, this is super powerful. Oh my God, I'm telling you, like Angus, I'm sure, like whatever you just shared, the tools and like the technique, it's going to be such an eye opener for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's great something like to implement into the practice. And you're right, like days nowadays it just going. And you know what I noticed, like, and I also was guilty of that when we were going together with the family. It's like everybody is pulling their phones
Yeah.
and everybody, and it's like, what's the point to go out?
Right.
Because before, when we go out, it was like, okay, let's communicate, let's have good time together, let's talk what's going
Yeah.
on. Now it's more like, you just go there. I don't even know what's the point of going, just to eat, but everybody is so consumed with their own gadgets, that there is no connection whatsoever. And
Right.
I think it goes for everybody like nowadays. So that's why it's so important to practice mindfulness. It's so important to connect with ourselves. It's so important to journal, like to really understand what is something that makes us alive, what is something that we want to improve in our life, and how we can show up as the better person than yesterday.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
Totally. You
Thank
know
you.
what? I have actually like I think I can explain why like a lot of people, like for example, Angus, you were talking about Disney, right? Like what you were saying, and you were saying correct, like it's not Disney fault, you're not blaming it on Disney. And I agree, I don't blame it as well. But I do have something to say about that. It's not so much about Disney, it's much more about TikTok. It's about TikTok and Instagram because people watch like short form content,
Sure.
and they watch these like 5-second videos, and like it's they're looping the video, like always rewatching the video, they're always rewatching the same action, the same music, the same letters, right? They're always rewatching it, always rewatching, like
Sure.
they're looping. Like the video is not just a loop of the video like consumes your mind as a loop as well, because if the video is a loop, the video is also going to loop in your mind nonstop, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds. It's almost like a beat loop, right, of
Sure.
the music, right? And so that stays in your mind, and that stays in your mind. It's like, for example, I think we both think we all know, right? And me, Irene, and you, Angus, that the pleasure starts in the imagination,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And so these dopamine hits that like people are getting from these videos, right? It's hidden pleasure, right? because the point of people is not to watch it and get pleasure from it. Well, kind of it is, right? But
Sure.
at the same time, they're not getting pleasure from doing it. They're getting pleasure from the idea of doing it, which will program their minds into wanting to love more. Like, it will program their minds to love more the idea of having it than really doing it,
Sure.
right? Because when they're getting pleasure from what they're seeing, they're not getting pleasure from doing it. They're getting pleasure from imagining it, doing it themselves. They're
Sure.
getting pleasure from the idea of it, right? So when they're going into a relationship, they almost like want to copy what's happening in those videos, right? And
Sure.
then when they are able to copy it, what ends up happening is like, I mean, yeah, well, I've done it now. Why doesn't this feel as good as it should, right? It felt very good before. Why doesn't it now, right? And so they just end up understanding that, oh, I thought I liked him, but I don't actually. I was like, yes, you liked the idea of it. You didn't really like the actual thing. But yeah, that was just an idea. But anyways, yeah.
It's so funny. As you were talking, something came to my mind. The as people watch those videos, sometimes they look so smooth. They'll. There's
Mhm.
something that comes to my mind right now. There's this challenge right now for partners where the man will put his hand on the back of the woman's head, and then she'll put her hands over his hands, and then he will lower her down to the floor, face down, like she's very trusting, right? Her hands are behind her head, and then he will lift her back up. Well, when you watch the first couple of people do it, and it's all to music, so it's like real cool to watch, but it takes like 3 seconds. So it looks smooth and easy. And so I think people get the idea that relationships kind of like that are smooth and easy. Well,
Mhm.
my
Right.
partner Mayan and I recreated that, and it's a post on our Instagram if you want to go see it. But the first time that you go to do it, it's wonky, it's uncomfortable. I've had kind of a motorcycle accident and a sports accident on both shoulders. So both of my shoulders are not, they don't work like I want them to. And so when I first went to do it, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. My shoulder popped like three big pops. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know if we can do this, babe. And so she was kind of like, oh, kind of disappointed. We went to the gym. I did a couple of exercises, kind of strengthening, testing. I'm like, I think I can do it. So then we set up the camera and we did it and we recorded it. But we recorded it 7 times before we got the one that she liked that we could post. And I think most people know that those things that look real smooth, in reality, they're not as smooth. Like, it takes 7 takes, it takes practice. And so, yes, they want to watch it and they want to see it. And then they want it to look real smooth when they're in their relationship, not realizing that most of the stuff that you're seeing isn't real. It's a
Mhm.
manufactured, fabricated thing to look good, but it takes practice to look good. It takes effort and intention to look good. So I agree with you, Bruno. Like, we see it and we want it, but we have to realize that there's something or a lot behind that to make it look good. And we get to be comfortable with embracing that process to create something that looks good. It doesn't just happen. It's not just happily ever after.
I love what you're sharing, Angus, because relationship is the work. A lot of people think that, okay, once I'm married, and I was married for 24 years. And, like once somebody thinks, okay, I'm married, I don't have to put in the work, not realizing that it requires even more work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It doesn't have to be hard, but
exactly,
you
it
have to be
does.
intentional. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And a lot of people do not know how to deal with these things, right? So it's
Right.
either, like go and consume yourself in the work. So you kind of quiet the noise, what's not working in the relationship. And it's also inability to communicate because, again, we go to the source that we were not properly taught how to do that.
Right.
So it's kind of like we are just navigating the best we can,
Sure.
right? And sometimes people get aggressive, some people take the heat, and that's the dynamic of some relationships.
Yeah.
But then again, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be happy, and when they where they are together, right? So that inner work and the work on ourselves and the work in partnership is super super important.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up for us a lot in coaching, and for some reason, some people think this is controversial, and I don't see it. And hopefully, you guys will hear what I'm saying. But we talk frequently about masculinity and femininity and the dance between the
Mhm,
two. And that being
mhm,
said, like every woman has both masculine and feminine energy in her, and every man has both in him. But in a partnership, you need polarity. You need one person to be in one most of the time and the other person to be in the opposite. If you have two people in either energy, you end up with problems. So if both people are in the masculine, you'll have a lot of conflict, you'll have a lot of headbutting, you have a lot of fighting and arguing, because both people are trying to lead. It's like watching a dance between two people who are both trying to lead the dance. I don't care how good of dancers you are. If you're both trying to lead, you're going to look terrible at dancing. You get to choose which one of us is leading right now and which one of us is following to create something that looks great. And so we were talking earlier, and one of the things that I realized that I've been coaching a lot on lately is women think that they do a good job of communicating because they use a lot more words than men. And so they think that they're the better communicators and men are the weaker communicators. But men are just better at communicating non-verbally than women are. And one of the things that I think we've been taught that hasn't really been helpful for relationships, it's been helpful in other ways. Like, for instance, modern feminism, or even going back to feminism in general, has really just been the idea of helping women move into their masculine energy, into their doing energy, into their working energy, which is great if they're going to be in the workforce. But it puts them in a place where now that they're trying to be in relationships, they're used to being in their masculine energy. And so now the man in their life, if he's going to be in his masculine energy, they're going to butt heads. If he tells her that she shouldn't be in her masculine energy, she thinks he's holding her down. If she protests and tries to stay in her masculine energy, almost by definition, he's going to move into his feminine because he doesn't want to keep conflicting with his wife or with his woman. So then she loses respect for him because he's not in his leading and his doing energy. And it creates this absolute downward spiral for relationships. So it doesn't have to be hard. And there are tools and techniques to learn how to communicate from the feminine that will make the man extra responsive to the woman. And so that's part of what we teach and what we coach, is how to communicate from the feminine, and what that looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, and how men respond so much better when they get the feedback from that feminine energy instead of from the masculine energy from their woman.
I love what you shared, and it's all about the balance, right?
Yeah,
And we also want, as the, like as ourselves, have the balance of feminine and masculine energy as well, so we operate even better.
yeah,
And I love how you shared, and I think a lot of times women step into the masculine energy because they do not feel safe.
100%.
And that's exactly what happens, right? When they feel like, okay, if I don't take care of myself, nobody would. And I have to be somebody who is like constantly, doing things and creating the freedom for myself. That's why a lot of times you see like the women who are not balancing their masculine and feminine energy is
Right.
because they are on that kind of mindset.
Yeah. The other thing we see too is that so many women have grown up in the last 30, 40, 50 years being celebrated for what they've been doing. So, we want you to get straight A's. We want you to get into the right school. We want you to do well in sports. We want you to do, and we acknowledge everything that you do. Well, what that has taught so many women is that doing and doing energy is where they get acknowledged. It is where they get recognition. It is where they get the love, especially like the love of their father. And so it keeps them in that kind of, they're like rewarded for being in that energy. Well, when I do stuff, I'm acknowledged. When I do stuff, I get pay raises. When I do stuff, I get the attention that I like. When I go into my feminine and I'm just being, I feel lost. Like nobody seems to pay attention to me. Nobody seems to protect me. Nobody seems to provide for me, care for me. I have to go back into doing to provide for myself, protect myself. And many women have a shut down feminine energy. And that doesn't mean that they're not dressed like a woman or do their hair or their nails. That has almost nothing to do with feminine energy. Feminine energy is the way of being out of your head and in your body, like really feeling the flow of energy instead of, you talked earlier, Bruno, about being self-reflective. And a lot of women think that they're self-reflective. I would argue that many of the women who think they're self-reflective are just overthinking. They're overanalyzing. Are they actually getting something out of it, or are they just in a thought loop that keeps them in their
Right.
head instead of getting
Right.
out of that and into their body and into their feminine energy?
Absolutely. Like I completely agree with that. And it's like, for example, I'm a self-love coach for women. So like when you were saying like, women when they're 12 and 13, like they get all these, expectations onto them, and they, all these beauty standards and all these expectations, all these emotional, like things on top of them and stuff. And I completely agree with that. It's like, for example, I think like, having a plus one obviously works, right? If you do things the right way, but understanding like the societal pressures that, a woman, like for a man to understand the societal pressures that a woman goes through on a daily basis helps the marriage or the relationship like to work better as well,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
The because that's the thing, like this is what I believe, like for example, I learned something new today, right? I thought that men were better at communicating, like with actual words,
Mm.
and women were better with non-verbal kind of like behavior,
Mm.
right? Because I've always seen women talk more with puzzles and kind of, I wouldn't say play a game, but like talk more with puzzles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To see if the man is smart enough to follow it up,
Yeah.
right?
They test him. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. But and I've also kind of like I've seen more men being like, look, like I don't know what this means, just say it. Oh no, no, that's not fun. Like so like it's just yeah. So that's actually quite interesting. That's fascinating actually.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. Also, and yeah, I mean it's like, yeah, if I think that, like I believe that, if a person knows what their plus one, can go through on a daily basis because of how they're depicted, because of how they're, described, because of what people already expect from them, like on a regular basis. I think that, like, people know how to also approach that, right?
Yeah.
People would know more how to like deal with those situations. And I guess that, like, for example, I guess that even if, men are not women, and women are not men, I think that, like, I think that, um, I think, for example, like, I sometimes, like, when Irina doesn't like something, right? If I put myself in her shoes, even if I'm a man putting myself in the shoes of a woman, right? I will
Hmm.
like, well, I mean, I wouldn't like that too, even if I'm a man. Even if she's a woman and I'm a man, like, I still wouldn't like that too,
Sure.
right? And Irina also tells me, yes, and I do the same thing. Like if I put myself in your shoes, right, I also wouldn't like to hear that, right? Um, so yeah, so if she puts myself on my shoes, if I put myself on her shoes, right, even if for men and women, it still works, because like I truly believe like there's certain things that you don't need to be that specific in order to understand that you shouldn't talk this way, you shouldn't do it this
Sure.
way, right? You shouldn't, right? Like you don't like we don't have to go that far. Now there are certain things that we do, and one of them is, the societal expectations, right? Like certain things, but especially understand, like I think like sitting down on the couch, right? And like understanding what have you brought up to your adulthood that you couldn't take away, that you didn't want to from your childhood. So I think like sitting down on the couch and being like, okay, so let's talk about what you brought to your adulthood that you probably wouldn't want to in from your childhood, and now it's really impacting your relationships in a bad way,
Okay.
right? I think that's like a very good thing, because you'll understand like what the problem will be for a relationship to end by knowing like whatever happened in their childhood because of their parents, right? So like, because that's the thing, is like, again, it's a relationship, right? So you're there to help each other, you're there to support each other, you're there to, help, like, you're not there to make each other grow, you're there to help each other grow. So the work comes from us, and we're here to help you. I'm here to help Irene, Irene is here to help me, and because you're there to help Maya, I presume that's her name, and yeah, and Maya is there to help you, Angus, right? But the work comes from us, and I guess like that's one of the most like beautiful things about like having a plus one, is
Sure.
like it's like you're not alone anymore, right? But that's the thing. Is like I, for example, like I was so used to being on my own all the time, all the time, all the time, right? I was so used to being like on my own all the time, all the time, all the time, that when I met Irina, I was like, man, I don't want to be in a relationship now. It's like I remember like back in the day, like I always wanted to be in a relationship. I was like, oh, I wish I could be in a relationship. Wish I could be with this person. I'd be with that person. Oh my god, whatever. And then I spent 5 years on my own, and then Irina came into my life, and then I was like, I mean, now I'm fine though. Like it's like I don't need one now, right? And it was kind of a challenge for me to like kind of it was kind of a challenge for me to kind of like um I wouldn't say understand that it's good for me, but just like kind of like take the risk, you know,
Yeah.
especially like for the benefit. So I have also a question for you.
Okay.
Um, let's imagine that we have somebody else that is in the same situation, right? Let's say that the person spent like single for many years. Let's say the person like and now the person like it's fine by herself, and somebody appears, and the person feels attracted to this person. The person kind of likes the person, these things. The person wants to see what's happening here and there with the person, with their kind of like, let's say, future plus one, right? But the person is a little bit like like hesitant, right,
Yeah.
towards that. What do you think that, like, what would be kind of the next step for them to understand um what to do?
When they're in that hesitancy, like what's the next step?
Yeah.
Okay. It's funny. I just had a conversation. I was at a social mixer last night, and there was a absolutely stunning woman, and she and her mother were there, and I would have sworn they were sisters or just coworkers. But the mother's like, yes, you need to talk to her. She's amazing, and she just needs to like meet somebody. And then I started having a conversation with this woman, and she was kind of presenting a very similar energy to what you're talking about. She's like, I just, I go out on dates, but I don't need a man. I have been single for a long time now, and I'm fine with it. And so, like, I keep hearing from men that, like, well, I just didn't think you were that interested. And she's like, I just keep hearing that. So, like, I don't know if they need me to need them or what, but like, I was having fun with them, but they didn't seem to think it was going anywhere. So they would move on. And so I bring that up to say it can be different things for different people who have kind of similar outcomes. But what I find is that typically there's some sort of energetic block. There's something that we believe, there's something that we're giving off that is basically, there's a great little clip of a documentary. David Attenborough, he shows this video. It's on YouTube. It's only like a minute and a half. I show it to a lot of my clients, but there's a flower, and they put a node in the flower and hook it up to a speaker, and the flower gives off a vibration that you can hear audibly through the speaker. And then a bee comes and lands on the flower. And because the flower is grounded and has a negative charge, and the bee has been flying and picking up ions, it has a positive charge. And when the two touch, immediately the speaker goes silent. Because the charge on the flower and the charge on the bee positively match each other, and they wipe each other out. And the bee doesn't actually collect pollen. The negative charge and the positive charge, all the bee has to do is go close to the pollen, and you watch it jump off of the little flower pistils onto his body. Like, he's not in there collecting it. His charge, his like static charge, like you've had static in laundry, when that bee lands on it, the charge pulls it across. Well, those same things are happening. In fact, the bees know when they're flying by flowers if a bee has been to that other flower, because it no longer is giving off that audible sound that it can pick up on, and then we can test through those little nodes and speakers. So it will fly by flowers that other bees have already been to, and it will go to flowers that are sending off the signal. And I think that that is happening all the time to humans. We just don't know consciously how to pick up on those signals. Unconsciously, vibrationally, energetically, we go around people that make us feel good. And other people, it's like, I don't know, they're beautiful, but like, there's just nothing there. Like, there's usually some sort of energetic block, just like that flower who's given away the last of its pollen, and now other bees don't go over and talk to it. once that's healed, once that's cleared up, once that's back and you're recharged and you've produced new pollen, new bees are going to come. And I think energetically people are like that. Like we may be giving off stuff that are pushing people away and telling us, oh, they're just not ready for us. And I like to think that the good news in that is that it's not out there. We don't have to wait for the world to find us. We get to look within, maybe with the help of a coach like you or me, and get help on what am I doing? What signals am I sending out so that I can send the right signal to attract the right bee, the right man, the right woman into my life, clearing out those blocks and setting ourselves up energetically to magnetically attract the ideal type of partner.
Oh my God, I just love that bee story. This is like so, like interesting because I would never know about it. And it's so true. It just, like this story reminds me that we do not have to do much if our energy is magnetic, right? We do not even have to like really put too much effort. And that's exactly like you said that, that pollen just gets into, like bees, body, whatever they're picking up, right, with the legs. But it's incredible story. I just love how you're describing. But I wanted to touch on the point about how important it is in the relationship when people have similar goals, similar dreams, similar interests. And I know that, Angus, at some point you're coming back to our talk show because I love our conversation and I would love you to bring your wife with you,
Yeah,
Mayan, so we can all four just chit chat and have more on that note. But can you just explain how important it is to have this common factors in the relationship?
absolutely. You guys are going to love Mayan. Like people tell me they love me, but like when they meet Mayan, she's just absolutely, she's gorgeous, first of all, but she just has such a warm heart. You're going to love that conversation. So I'm looking forward to that too. To answer your question though, if you follow the Gottmans, who are love and relationship experts, and one of the things that they say is the capstone that makes relationships last is if the couple shares a common vision. Like, are you guys together as a couple just to feel good, just for a short period of time, just for the kids? Like what is holding you together? If you don't have that good long-term vision of this is what the purpose of our lives together is, then the likelihood of you having a breakup or a divorce goes up dramatically. So I think it's one of the most important things that while you're single and looking or dating, you get to start figuring out what's the purpose of us coming together. Like, it's not just because I love you and you love me and we feel good together, because the feelings of love are not enough to hold a relationship together. Love is a commitment. Love is a verb. Love is an action. But in that action, you get to build. I like to think of it. My dad was a general contractor and build homes. I have a construction company I own. Like, I think of it a lot in terms of building. Like, if we don't put it together and lay a solid foundation that we're building something on, then it's going to fall apart at some point. And so what are we building it on? If it's just the feelings of love, it will fall apart. But if it's, hey, the universe or God or whoever, whatever you believe, some higher power, or we ourselves believe that we're together for a reason, like there has to be something that says, here's what the purpose of us coming together does to make the world a better place. And if you can find something common that you both are passionate about, that you both are trying to build together, your relationship, it may not be smooth sailing, but like it will be strong enough to weather whatever the storms are. And you can learn how to have smooth sailing through different techniques and through coaching and stuff like that. So it's possible to get there, but the glue to hold it together is absolutely some sort of bigger vision than just you yourself or you together just having a good time.
I love it. And another question I have, how important it is for both partners to continue growing, to continue self development and self growth?
It's a fantastic question. This has come up a couple times recently as I've been talking. This is the funny thing. Personal growth and development is more important for some people than it is for others. It's a value, and some people have it high on their values list. Some people have it in the middle, and some people have it like down at the bottom or not at all. And most of the people who are listening to this are probably people that value personal growth and development relatively high, or they probably wouldn't be listening to this. The reason I'm bringing that up is I have some great friends that are a couple that they just love hanging around the pool on the weekends and drinking beers or going to the lake or whatever. Like, they don't care about growing and personal growth and development. They have a good relationship. Like, they're doing what they love. They have something in common that binds them together, and they never think about growing. Now, are they maximizing their lives? Maybe not, but I'm not here to judge
Mhm.
somebody
Mhm.
else's life and their purpose of their life. If they're happy and that's their ideal life, then maybe that's perfect for them. But if it's high on your priority list as a person, then most likely you probably want to, as you're dating, extract that information from your partner and like, hey, how do you feel about this? What does it look like when we're together? I'm probably going to go to these seminars, or I like reading books and podcasts. Are you going to be willing to hear me or listen to some of the stuff or read same stuff that I read, or go to some of these things with me? Or, as if you listen to Mayan, she used to, in her previous marriage, she would read a book. She's personal growth and development is like way at the top for her. So she's always going to seminars. She's signing up for stuff, reading books, doing stuff. She would read a book and then leave it on his nightstand. And then after 3 or 4 days, it would be back on her nightstand because he would put it back over there. He didn't care. It wasn't a priority to him at all to go on that journey that she was on. And that was a huge problem for their relationship. It was one of the main reasons that their relationship ended up breaking apart, because they just had such different values that didn't align, and they didn't have the tools at this time to bring it together and to grow. Since her divorce and since my divorces, we've done the work separately, met on the journey along the way, and then it's just gotten even better since we know the tools and continue to build intentionally together.
I just love what you share because I can totally relate. As I was on that path of growing, my ex-husband was staying where he was staying. And, if people don't grow together, they grow apart. And that's exactly what was happening. And there were a lot of different other things in between. But just to say, what a blessing when the two people are on the same page and they are willing to listen, they are willing to work, they are willing to make that relationship something amazing. It's just, sometimes we can sabotage ourselves because of our beliefs that it's not possible, right? And I'm thinking to myself, because I was on the verge of divorce 6 years ago,
Mm,
and it was always the initiative of my ex-husband.
mm,
And that was the time when I actually started to waken up to there is something more to us than just our physical body and the reality.
right.
And like, I have to be grateful for that experience, because otherwise I would be still asleep, like majority of people are navigating this life. But it also started to like really opening the eyes on a lot of things that many people do not pay attention. And
Yes.
it's so true. The more aware we become, the more we like start digging deeper, deeper. And for a lot of people, it's like very uncomfortable, because they know they start digging, and there are more, like skeletons in that, wardrobe, and they can, like really start like more understanding and seeing that maybe this is not the right relationship that they are in. And I think it's so important to face the reality. And whoever is listening, I know this is the message that finds you for, for some reason. I know that there are a lot of couples who are also living in that fear that, hey, you know what, I don't want to break what I created, so I'm too scared to be alone. And I remember at one point it was also my biggest fear. But the more you like really connect with yourself and understanding what you are all about, and you just start to love yourself better, you just start to trust yourself, and then just opening yourself up for new possibilities, it just, like the life becomes so much more amazing.
I agree. I agree 100%. And like, as a person who's gone through the divorces myself, like, it is incredibly heartbreaking, and I think it wrecks your ego. Like, it can be absolutely devastating. And what I want to say is, just like you said, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
and you heal from this, you will be better for it. So don't get discouraged. Keep your head up. If you're still in the relationship, I'll say this: I'm never a proponent for, unless there's like abuse of some kind. I'm never a proponent for throwing away an old relationship, because typically when you throw away that old relationship, all you're doing is saying, I'm no longer willing to work on these things with you. I'm now choosing to go work on them with somebody else, whether it's a therapist or a coach or the next partner. The issues that you're having in that old relationship are somehow related to you, and you get to work on those at some point. They're going to
Mhm.
show up at some point in the future. So the good news is, if you have those things going on in you, you can start by working on you right now and change the current relationship that you're in right now. Now, some people are like, well, he's not willing to work on himself. You're right. He's not, or she's not. But when you work on you, you begin to heal, you begin to change, and you change the relationship. By definition, it's no longer the same relationship because you're not the same person. So any two people can make it if they're willing to. And yes, it can be harder if one person's not willing to. And I totally, that's why I don't do most couples coaching anymore, because usually by the time they come to me, one of them is checked out and doesn't want to even try anymore. And that's a really difficult place to come back from. But start, I don't care if you're still in a relationship, start by working on you, because that's where you have the most effect. That's where you can control the most. And I'll just say this, people can hate me for this or what, but um, one of the things that I think is almost disturbing, when people start to do the work on themselves, they start to act like, oh, I've done all this work on myself and he doesn't or she doesn't. And it's like they take on a level of pride over their other partner. I'm going to tell you right now that when you have that arrogance about working on yourself compared to somebody else, like that's really off-putting to your partner. I even see it when I'm coaching people, like women will come and say, well, I've done so much work on myself. No men out there have done as much work on it. I'm like, you're holding yourself up above them. Like when you carry that level of pride, it's like an arrogance, it's an ego thing. Like there's something still out of place. Like with growth should come humility, should come curiosity
Mhm.
instead of judgment and arrogance. So I really caution people, when you do the work on yourself, it should make you more humble, more patient, more gracious to your partner
Mhm.
instead of more arrogant. And so if you're experiencing
Mhm.
something opposite of that, look again, because there's something else going on, and you should be giving more patience and grace to that partner, which will eventually cause them to actually want to listen to you because they see a change in you that they actually admire. When you just think you're getting better and holding it over their head, they don't admire you for that. They actually probably lose respect for you.
I actually have to add to that point, because actually that's what was happening in my life. Like I witness of that, and the same thing as you were sharing about Mayan. Uh, Although she was put in these books, right, it still didn't work out. So the same thing, it did not work out in my marriage. As much as I was patient, as much as I was, like thinking that something is going to change, but always changing as myself. And that's another thing that I always tell people when they come to me. I say, either your partner is going to pick up and grow with you, or he's just going to fall off, because you will attract somebody who matches your energy, who matches your frequency, and
Yeah.
somebody who really really is there to, like for two of you to enjoy the life.
Yeah. And right there with that is, if that partner that you're currently with doesn't, your own growth in your own journey is still worth it. Like even if they
Exactly.
don't pick up, your own growth in your own journey is still worth it. You're going to still reap the benefits from it. So do it for you. Don't do it for that relationship. Make you the best you can be. And I promise you, you will either sooner or later be in a better relationship because you are a better person.
Yes, I love everything. Bruno, do you want to wrap us up because we are running out of time?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Angus, for being here.
My
Like,
pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
like this was awesome. This was really good. It was an excellent conversation, and I can't wait to see how it actually be when the four of us, are here having the conversation. But yeah, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your knowledge.
My pleasure.
And yeah, I mean, if I was going to add the if I was going to add something to that, I find that extremely hard, because it was very good. But if I was going to add something to that, it's like, well, I think like just remember that like Like relationship is not like the 100-meter sprint.
Hmm.
It's like if you're truly gonna be brave enough to nowadays be in a relationship for like 40, 50 years, you know, because it takes a lot of bravery. Like remember, like it's like you can either focus on the negative aspects and on the extreme downsides of like, look, Tinder, Bumble. It's like, my friend, like you're either it or you're a goner. Like what I mean? It's like you're either that or bye, right? Because there's so many options
Right.
nowadays, right?
Right.
And so you can either focus on that, or you can focus on like, look, I'm gonna give my best. I'm gonna try to be the best husband I can possibly be, or boyfriend, or I'm gonna try to be the best wife that I can be, or girlfriend, right?
Hmm.
And we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so it's day by day. Like there's honestly no point in like overthinking how you're gonna be in 10 years, right? Because you don't even know if you're gonna be alive in 10 years. Might as well like be in a relationship,
Right.
right? So like day by day, no problem. Like it's like just like day by day, one step in front of the other. Like there's no need to be skipping steps, because you can take one step forward, or you can take two steps skipping one, and then end up going even lower than you already are because you were skipping stuff, right? So step by step, whenever things are meant to happen, they happen. Does that mean that you're gonna wait for them to happen now? You're gonna do whatever you need to do for them to come to fruition, because you want it, right? Both of you want it, right? But when the right time comes, the right time comes, and usually when the right time comes, people eventually understand why that is the right time and why the other times weren't.
Right.
So yeah,
All right. Yes, that was a powerful, powerful conversation. Angus, again, thank you so much. And we posted the links for people to check on you and your beautiful Mayan. And yeah, let's come back and have another conversation. That was super powerful.
I look forward.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a good
thank you,
one.
Angus.
Bye.